All right, so I just noticed that in the drop-down menu for the survey, I believe the option was not showing up yet. I just updated that for folks. I will make sure to share that before we end the chat as well, in case you weren't able to do the pre-survey. So no worries if you weren't able to get to it, and my apologies for that delay. But we'll get started. We'll go ahead and get started, and some folks might be joining in the next few minutes. So my name is Sela. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm one of the community outreach specialists here at the Q Corner at Collective. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. I know this is a really important topic, especially right now, in lieu of current events, the new administration that will be, kicking in a few weeks. And so we're really happy that y'all are here to, talk about this topic. Um, Before I pass it on to our lovely presenters, I did want to just mention that this training will be recorded. So this will be available a little bit later through our Q Corner YouTube channel. So we'll make sure to share that with participants as well. And then at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there should be an option for Q&A. So there you're more than welcome to ask any questions that come up during the presentation. You can either ask them anonymously or, with your name included. And I will make sure to, address and mention those questions so folks are able to address those questions throughout the presentation. All right. And of course, if y'all have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I believe since it's in webinar mode, people don't have access to the chat. So if anything, please feel free to email us if y'all have any other additional questions. So now I'll go ahead and pass it on to our lovely presenters.
Thank you, Sela. My name is B.J. Fadem. I am the founding attorney of the Law Offices of B.J. Fadem and Associates, and with me tonight is my senior associate, Erica Lee, and our newest associate, Jack O'Halloran. And we're here to talk to you about protecting your LGBTQ plus family, especially as Sela said, with the incoming administration. A lot of people are very, very concerned. So with that, let's take a look at what we're going to go over tonight. We're going to go over a little bit of the background and all the different options of what you can do. There are things that you can do to try and protect your LGBTQ family, even in light of the new administration and the threats that are coming down the line. So what are those? What's the current law now? If you all know that California currently, we did put protection of same-sex marriage to keep it legalized in the California Constitution in anticipation of what's coming down the line. And also under the current law, with that, any child that is currently born within a marriage, whether it's same-sex or not, or a state-registered domestic partnership, is automatically under California law deemed to be the legal child of both parents. So I get that question a lot. Why do we need to do anything further? Well, here's why. What are the concerns? There's several. Number one, even with the current law, if you travel outside of California or the United States, if you are only relying upon the fact that your child was born within the marriage or the domestic partnership, you might have some issues, especially abroad. So that's one problem. The other is, with what's coming up, DOMA may return, which means that same-sex marriage may no longer be federally protected. And if that's the case, they may even try and make it illegal in California. They have already, you see what's happening with the abortion laws. We really don't know, but we can see the writing on the wall that I think the anticipation is it's no longer going to be federally protected. We've seen some signs just in some changes in the law. We practice primarily family law and within probate, which encompasses these adoptions and things we're going to be talking about. But we're also seeing, with regard to the newest, was that the child support calculations that are coming out new are now differentiating whether it is a same-sex marriage or not, because it's going to change the tax laws, which is an indication to me of a red flag that they're anticipating no longer same-sex marriages are going to be federally protected. And that's a real concern. So we are concerned that LGBTQ plus families will no longer be protected. So what can we do?
So to start off and to kind of give a little bit of background as to where we're at legally, California enacted something called the Third Parent Law back in January of 2014. California recognized over 10 years ago at this point that the nuclear family just doesn't really exist anymore, and that we have blended families, that we have different situations concerning kids where they will often have more than two parents. And so California created the Third Parent Law and enacted this into several different statutes, one of them being the Minor Child Adoption Statute, which was amended in 2014 to allow for a child to have more than two parents legally. So if you were to adopt a child as a third parent, that child could legally have three parents, maybe four, five. It doesn't really put a limit on it as long as it's in the best interest of the child. As far as adults go, in 2014, there wasn't any amendment to that statute. This seemed to be an oversight on the part of the legislator. You are allowed to be adopted as an adult as long as you are 10 years older than the adoptee. But in 2019, this statute was then amended to add an adult adoption statute to allow for a third parent. So now it covers both minor adoptions and adult adoptions. So we'll start off with step-parent adoptions, which is going to be the biggest tool that you can use in order to establish your legal parentage. So there's two types of step-parent adoptions. The first is what we acknowledge as a regular step-parent adoption, or a domestic partner adoption. This is where the child was born before the marriage and with another partner. You're coming in as a step parent and adopting that child as a third parent, or taking the place of the other parent. The second one is a quote step parent adoption, which I put in quotations because really what this is doing is confirming your parentage. It's not necessarily a step parent adoption per se, but the statutes and the process is similar to that of a step parent adoption. But what this does is this confirms parentage, which at the time the child was born, the adopting parent was married or in a registered domestic partnership with the parent who gave birth, or whose parentage was established through gestational surrogacy process and remain in the union. So this is generally when the child was born during the partnership or marriage. So in order to do a step-parent adoption, there are several different pleadings that you need, and all of these can be found on the Santa Clara County Court website. And on the Adopt 050 info. It goes through each and every form and each and every box that you need. So generally what you need is the adoption request, which is your Adopt 200, the adoption agreement, which is the 210, the adoption order, the 215, and then several different Indian Child Inquiry forms, which are ICWA forms, and then the 205, which is a declaration confirming parentage. This is only if you are confirming parentage, not a regular step-parent adoption. And then a step-parent adoption consent form, and this is only for a regular step-parent adoption. So let's take a look at these pleadings really quick. So this is what the Adopt 50 looks like. This is the information page. It's a total of 4 pages, and it goes through all of the general information where you can find some assistance, and it gives you all of the different forms that you may need in your adoption and little checkboxes, which is helpful. It then kind of gives you a little bit of a background on how the process is going to go, what you need, and then the date of your adoption. And it just continues on, and it really just helps you go through the process. This is your Adopt 200, which is your adoption request. This is, I believe, 6 pages. And this is really the bulk of what you need in order to start your process. It's got lots of check boxes, and you're going to want to make sure you go through this very tediously to ensure that you're not missing any information. Here's page 3 and 4. And then 5 and 6. And you'll need to make sure that these are signed by all parties. In your Adopt 210, this is the adoption agreement. This requires the signatures of all parties involved, including the signature of the minor child if they are over the age of 12. It's important to note too that this adoption agreement does not get signed by itself. You actually sign this in front of the judge, so you'll need to bring it with you to court and be prepared to sign it in front of the judge. And really what this says is that we all agreed for the adoption. This is what the adoption agreement looks like. And it'll even let you know too that if a signature of the child is necessary, if the child is 12 years or older. This is what the step-parent adoption consent looks like, and this is only for those regular step-parent adoptions. This is really just a consent form from the current parent saying, yes, we consent to the adoption from the third parent. And then a little bit of an interesting, I guess, complex area. In a regular step-parent adoption where you're adding a third parent or you have an actual step-parent who is adopting, you do need to have the social services do an investigation. If you are confirming parentage, you do not need social services to do an investigation. The website's a little bit confusing on this, but step-parent adoptions to confirm the parentage do not need the social services investigation. When you complete that Adopt 200, that 6-page document that has all the information, under section 12E, you're going to check the box that says, this is an adoption to confirm parentage. No court investigation is required unless ordered for good cause. Once you have completed all of that, you have your court process. So you complete your pleadings and you file them. If you're not terminating parental rights of another parent and you're adding the third parent, you just go straight to the adoption hearing. Or in some cases, if you're confirming parentage, you don't actually need a hearing and the court will confirm that parentage without a hearing. If you're terminating the parental rights of a parent and you're keeping two parents, then you're going to have to go through an extra step, which is to terminate the parental rights of that parent. So they either are going to consent to the termination or there's going to be a contested hearing about the termination of those parental rights. After those parental rights are terminated, then you're scheduled at least 30 days after that termination for the actual adoption hearing itself, and you will go to a hearing on that adoption at that point. And this is assuming that all parties have consented.
So before we go into sperm donors and surrogacy, because we went through the step parent a little bit quickly, I want to kind of clarify what Erica was referring to when we talk about just a regular step parent adoption versus the confirmation of a parentage. When we're talking about the LGBTQ community specifically, when we're referring to a regular step parent adoption, let's say there is a couple, two women, one of the partners was married to a man previously and has a child from that particular marriage. Or you're even in a heterosexual relationship, but you're remarried. And so you have a child from a previous relationship and you want your new partner, who's either a registered domestic partner or married, to now adopt your child. That's when we're referring to a regular step parent adoption. That means that yes, there's going to be a social services investigation, whether you're adding this new partner as a third parent or you're trying to terminate the first parent's rights. So that's when you're going to go through that other process, and that is just what we talk about when we say a regular step parent adoption. For those that are trying to protect the children that are already born within your marriage or domestic partnership, those are what we're talking about as far as you're just going to go right through and you're not going to have social services investigation. You're just confirming the parentage. That's going to be the bulk of the cases that we're going to be seeing that you want to do in order to protect yourselves with what's going to happen in the future. Because those are the ones that already the child under current California law is the child of both parties, but you want to take that extra step to protect, whether you go outside of California, you go outside of the United States, or there's going to be a change because of the new administration. So those are the two different types that we're talking about. And you want to make sure that you know what type of step-parent adoption am I doing? And it's very important to know for any of the step-parent adoptions, you either have to be married or you have to be registered with the state of California as a domestic partner. You can't just be partners residing together, and let's say you had a child together, but you were not married and you weren't registered as domestic partners. You cannot do a step-parent adoption. You have to be married or registered domestic partners. That's very important. I've had couples come to me. They weren't married and they wanted to do a step-parent adoption. You can't do it. So be aware of that. The other part to it, and what's within our LGBTQ plus community, is the polyamorous families. And this is where the third parent adoption is great. You can now, because I had years ago, several polyamorous families come to me and they wanted to ensure that there were parental rights of all three parents for the child. And you couldn't do it. You now can do it. And so if you do have a polyamorous family, this is one of the things you're going to want to look to and make sure that you add all three parents as legal parents to protect the child.
And in the event that you are not married or not registered partners and you have a child with your partner, in that case, you can do a parentage action, which is through family court. It's a much longer action. It can be a little bit more expensive, but at least in family court, you can ask for a waiver depending on your financial circumstances. It's just a different process, which you're not covering today.
No, it's a completely different process. And unfortunately, it's county by county whether or not they're going to approve it. I think we can pretty well safely say in Santa Clara County it will, but there are some counties that may not approve that process. So you got to be aware of that as well. So sometimes, depending upon the circumstances, you may want to register as domestic partners or you may want to get married if you have children.
And in that circumstance, you can also go through a regular independent adoption. But again, that's going to require a social services investigation because it's not a step parent adoption to confirm parentage. The social services investigation can be extremely costly. It's upwards of thousands of dollars. That is taken up with social services agency directly on whether or not you can get a waiver or a reduction of those fees.
And it can take a very long time.
Yes.
They are very backlogged, and sometimes you won't hear from them for months even before they get started. So just be aware of that, and balancing what type of process do you need to start.
All right, moving on to sperm donors and surrogacy, where I will pass it off to Jack.
I'll jump in here. So sperm donors and surrogacy, this is an option that certain LGBTQ plus families might take. This is not accessible to all families, whereas some of the other options that we might go through are. This option can be costly. It's just not accessible to everyone. So for sperm donors, this will require contacting a sperm bank or agency. And so when you're looking at the actual paperwork, the sperm bank and or agency will handle most of the paperwork. So when you're considering who your sperm donor is, depending on who that person might be and the agency used, these types of donations might be either closed or open. So depending on the type of donation, you want to be careful when you're considering the type of when you're considering parentage, because when you're thinking about later down the line, if you're close to the person or if you're thinking of using a friend for a sperm donation, there's a potential for later down the line for that person to come in and establish parentage. You just want to make sure that all of your T's are crossed and all of your I's are dotted, which at the outset, if you're using the right sperm bank and agency, they'll handle those things for you.
So one of the biggest things you got to be aware of, and our office handled a horrendous case where two people, they were doctors and thought that they could do it on their own. If you're going to get a donor that is known, definitely see an attorney, Because in addition to the agreements and paperwork you have to execute, if you do not want the donor to be considered a parent, there are things you have to do or not do to ensure that. Otherwise, you can reverse it, and all of a sudden, what you thought was a sperm donor is now the other parent that you're going to be sharing custody with. And that's what Jack was referring to.
Yeah, so two options. You can use a sperm bank or agency, or if you're going to go with a known donor or no agency, you need to see an attorney to make sure that you have everything laid out prior to, so that you don't encounter those problems down the line. But if you go with a sperm bank or agency, you're going to have to go through the process just laid out by Erica in the last slides. So surrogacy. So similarly, you can go through an agency as well, where they'll likely handle the contract for you. So surrogacy is a longer process. We again would recommend seeing an attorney for these types of things, for this type of process. Again, when you have a third party involved, whether they're known or not known, and it involves parentage, you want to be careful. So having your T's crossed and your I's dotted is most important. So if you choose the path of surrogacy, are you terminating the parental rights of the surrogate? If so, ensure that it's done properly and seek counsel. And if not, then seek counsel as well.
So the other thing is, I always recommend, if possible, you may want to use the genetic material of one of the partners, if it's possible, when you're dealing with the surrogacy. And the other part to that is surrogacy is not legal in all countries. And I'm not even sure if it's legal in all states. There's certain states that don't make it legal. So you got to be very careful. Obviously, in California, it is legal. And so as a result, if you're going to be doing surrogacy, that's why, as Jack was saying, even though you've done it through a surrogacy contract, you're going to want to do a step-parent adoption because it may not be recognized in another country. And another reason, if one of the partner's genetic material is being used, then you can utilize the step-parent adoption process for the other partner. But if you're not, you may have to add a layer of an independent adoption with this upcoming administration, and if you're going to travel outside the United States. So I recently dealt with a case with India, and India will not recognize any children born out of surrogacy. And so therefore, the parent that did not have any genetic material involved in the pregnancy does not have any legal rights to that child in that country. And there's other countries like that. So you have to be very, very careful about that. And that's another reason why, if you're going to go the route of surrogacy, it's really important to at least talk with an attorney before you enter into it, because it could backfire. So you have to be very, very careful.
Okay, moving on to the last topic, which is adult adoptions. Personally, these hold a very special place in my heart. I had my own adult adoption. Again, California finally recognized that the nuclear family doesn't exist, and my family was a blended family, and one of my father figures was my father figure for over 20 years before he actually adopted me, when this statute was changed in 2019. So the Adult Adoption Family Code statute requires that the adoptee and the adopting person must be over the age of 18. The adoptee must be younger than the adopting person by at least 10 years. The consent of the legal parents is not required. Adults can do what they want. If the adoptee or the adopting person are married, the consent of their spouse is required, and this is generally for estate planning issues. The action can be filed in the county in which either person resides. So if you have somebody living in Santa Clara County and another person in another state, you can file the action in Santa Clara County. No investigation or report is required. The court can do so under certain circumstances, but it's extremely rare. There have to be some certain facts for the court to want to do an investigation as to, you know, undue influence, duress, things of those sorts. There are special requirements for adults that are developmentally disabled for those reasons. And the adoptee can take the family name of the adoptive parents. So you can actually change your name, your last name during this process.
So Erica, with that, if you're not gonna add the third parent and you're doing an adult adoption, can the adoptee unilaterally terminate their biological parents' rights
Yes.
without having to go to a hearing?
Absolutely. So as an adult, you get to do what you want. And so you can terminate the parental rights of one of your current legal parents without notice or consent of that parent. So adding the third parent, this could be a step parent, this can be a parental figure, it could be somebody that you've had in your life that you consider a parental figure. You don't have to actually have any sort of familial relationship, and they don't have to be married to one of your legal parents. This again allows for the adoptee to waive the termination of parental rights of one or legal parents. So you can add the third parent, or you can terminate the rights of one or both of your parents, or all three of your parents if you already have three. You just have to make sure that there's at least one parent that's adopting you in this practice. If the adoptee does not want to terminate the parental rights, then you just need to make sure that you include specific language that allows for the termination of those rights so that you can add the third parent.
And Erica, we have a question in Q&A.
Sure.
So I'll read it aloud. It states, what is the process when previously married but now divorced on the children's birth certificate and also divorce decree stating 50-50 custody agreement? Question mark.
So is this
Yeah, if it's a same-sex or domestic partnership, where they're assuming the children, even in the divorce decree, that they're the children of the marriage. The concern we have moving forward, if they're going to be reversing the legalization of same-sex marriages and what may happen in the administration, what we're saying is even if you've already been divorced, it might be better to go forward and go ahead and do the confirmation of paternity. I hate that term paternity because it's a same-sex relationship, but I think you still need to move forward because a California divorce decree and judgment, I'm not sure in the future, we just don't know. Is it going to be viable to declare the parentage of the non-bio parent? That's our concern.
So BJ, what if you were able to get an order from the family court that specifically declares that parentage in an order?
That's what you can do. And I think we haven't done it yet because people haven't had the concern until now. But I think what might be able to be done is because the family court issues paternity judgments. I think in a case like that, you could probably go directly in and try, and I think especially I think Santa Clara County would do it because they know our judges, and just ask for an actual judgment of paternity, which would then declare as a matter of law that the other parent, the non-bio parent, is the legal parent of the children. And I think that would be the protection. But I wouldn't rely strictly on the divorce decree is my concern. That's where I'm concerned, even though it's on the birth certificate, because of what may be coming down the line.
And if you do have a divorce case already, you can do this as a post-judgment action, so you can kind of tack it on. You don't have to start a whole new action.
No, you could just go back into court under the divorce action and ask for a judgment confirming paternity. And the court, I am 99.9% sure that the court would do that, especially in light of what we're concerned about.
Okay, I think that answers the question. Okay, so yeah, we've already covered the termination of parental rights. The adoptee can terminate the parental rights of all or one of the legal parents without consent, without notice, and without a hearing. You're an adult, you get to do what you want. within reason. In order to facilitate this adoption, you're going to need several different documents, similar to the adult or to the minor adoption. Documents, you need an adoption petition, an adoption agreement. You'll need the consent of the spouse if the adoptee or the adopting person are married. And then you need an adoption order, and you need to fill out what's called a VS-44, which is a, oh my gosh, I just blanked. It's the record for your birth certificate.
Vital
with California.
statistics. It's
Yes.
the vital statistics form.
Yes. All right, so the adult adoption petition is going to look something like this. Unfortunately, there are not any forms for adult adoptions. You do have to write it up yourself, and just ensure that all of the statutes are available. I've created these templates here for general purposes, but if you go on the internet, a lot of times the SAC library, Sacramento County Library, will have examples of this where you can kind of fill in the blanks. And that's a really good resource just generally. The Sacramento County Law Library is available online. Your adoption agreement will also be written, and it basically just says, in accordance with the law, each party agrees to adopt the other. And this one will actually be signed prior to going to court, and you'll have to file this document with the court. Then you have your consent form in the event that one of the parties are married, which basically just says, yes, I consent to the adoption. And then this is the VS-44, which is the court report of adoption. You need to make sure that you fill this out so that it mirrors the birth certificate, and you need to include all of the parents that are going to be legal parents. So they have not updated this form to include more than 2 parents. So if you have a third parent that you're adding, you're going to need to do another form to attach to this to add the adoptive parent. It's really important that you write this in black ink, and you have to wet sign it, your original signature, in black ink on the day that you go and get your adoption done, and then you provide it to the clerk. It can't be an electronic signature, and it has to be the original signature, only in black ink. Stressing that, I've had several come back because they didn't think that it was the original wet signature. And then the court process for an adult adoption is really easy. You do have to go and file these in person with the clerk, but it's a very simple process if you go down to the probate clerk's office. There is no filing fee. So this is a completely free process, which is fantastic. So you go in, you file the pleadings, the clerk will set your hearing date. When those pleadings are filed, the adult adoption will generally be either in Department 1 or Department 13 of Santa Clara County. You'll show up for your adoption hearing. It's a really fun, really great process. You get to take lots of pictures. The court signs that order of adoption, and then you go back down to the probate clerk's office. You get that filed order of adoption, and you provide the probate clerk with the VS-44, and you get your certified copies. The certified copies are free, so my recommendation is to get at least 2, one for each party, and make sure you keep those in a safe place, because the certified copy is what's going to show that it's authentic and real. And I'll kick it back over to BJ.
So with that, we've gone pretty quick, but our hope for tonight was that with everything that's been going on, and I know everybody, including all of us in our office, are a little bit stressed as to what's going on with the administration, what's going to happen in the future. We don't know for sure. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm not sure how the laws are going to exactly change, but we're trying to prepare as much as we can. And so with that, I think it is important that you protect your LGBTQ family, how we've had that. We've been so secure in California here, but I'm not so sure that if we leave it as it is, that you're going to be secure going forward. So what you need to do is kind of sit back and look at how your family is generated right now. What do you have? And do I want to take that next step? Even before this transpired, I was getting calls from a lot of people in the community that their children were born within their marriage or the domestic partnership and said, well, do I still need to do something else? And my recommendation to them even back then was, I would recommend that you do. What if you travel outside the country? What if you relocate to another state? You never know when an employer is going to transfer you. You don't know what's going to happen. If one partner is in the military, you don't know what's going to happen. And so I really do think it's important that we do protect, because for a child to be completely ripped away from a parent that they've known as their parent, it's horrendous. It's traumatic to them, and we need to really protect our kids. So think about what process best fits your family, and if necessary, go ahead and at least pay and get some kind of consultation with an attorney to make sure, so that you know what you're doing. And also, even if you are going forward with one particular procedure and you're just starting your family, let's say, again, you can do everything right with regard to agreements, but what you don't realize is your conduct can completely reverse the agreement. So you have to be very, very careful, and it is good to know all of the legal rights, but there's so many, and they're very specific to your particular family. So sometimes it is well worth it just to spend a few minutes and talk with an attorney. We do it all the time. We could just advise people. We don't need to do the work for them. We may just advise them, this is what you need to do. So be very, very careful in what you're doing, and again, take a look at what is your family makeup now, or if you're planning a family. Even more important, I'm planning a family now with looking at what is going to be our future. How can I secure my family? So either way, you're going to want to take a look at all of these different options. But what I don't want is people to get completely depressed, saying, or traumatized that they're going to lose their families, their children. There are ways to protect, and there are things that you can do. And some of them you can do on your own. As we went through the slides, you can see that the easiest is just a simple step-parent adoption within a same-sex marriage or domestic partner. You could do on your own. They're judicial forms. There's no hearing. When you do an actual step-parent adoption or any other adoption, and the adult adoption, as Erica was saying, the judges in this county are phenomenal, and they do a celebration. And if it's a child, they get a present from the judge. They get to pick a toy that they have piled up to the side. So they won't let me have one every time I take a kid there to be adopted. I always ask if I can have one, and they never let me. But it's a really joyous occasion, and they really celebrate. So it is worth going through and making sure that it is protected.
I have
And
a
the great
question.
news is that in California, and especially in our county, there are so many different ways that you can protect your family. What we went through today was not an exhaustive list, as we had a question from one of the attendees. There's also a potential for parentage action, or to go back and do it through your divorce process.
I have a question. If, for God forbid, some reason I were to pass away without having some of these processes in place and any estate planning in place, what is the importance of having some of these processes in effect?
Good point, Jack, and that's a huge, huge concern and I'm glad you raised it. It's exactly a big concern, because if you pass away intestate, meaning without a will, it goes to any surviving spouse, legal spouse, not, and in California right now, still domestic partners. But then it would go, your children are going to inherit. But if the laws change, if California gets affected, and that's not your legal child, they're not going to be able to inherit. But even more important, let's say you're a couple and you're the bio parent, and you're just relying upon the marriage or the domestic partner, and something happens to you. You're assuming your spouse or your domestic partner will then get custody of your child. But I don't know in the future if the laws change and something happens, or you're no longer in California. That may not be the case if you don't have a legal adoption by the non-bio parent. And that would be horrendous, that if something happened to one parent and then all of a sudden the child is taken away from the other parent. So, or they have to go through a whole process that's separate, even though they're the parent, and then they have to be put in as either a foster parent or then they have to start as an independent adoption. So if you do this now, you're going to be protecting if something should happen to either one of you.
You want to enshrine your parental rights as much as you can, because California, we're okay right now, but it's not the same across the country. So you want to be able to withstand any sort of scrutiny, because parental rights as of right now and historically have been respected under the Constitution. So you want to make sure that they're enshrined while you can right now, so that potentially in the future you can be ready to go.
And this would also apply if one of the parents are undocumented and God forbid they get shipped back and something happens, or they get incarcerated, or they get taken by ICE. And you have the other parent, which is documented, but they don't have the legal rights to the child. And so the child is going to be left and put as a ward of the court. So in case of any deportation or incarceration by ICE, you want to make sure also that your children are going to be protected. And in that particular case, you need to set up some kind of a plan just to be on the safe side. With that, any other questions that we'll open up to just generally about the LGBTQ family and any rights?
I just wanted to remind folks, in case you joined a little bit later, at the bottom, there's usually a toolbar with Zoom, and there's a Q&A function. So there is where you're able to ask any questions. You can ask them anonymously or, with your name included, and we'll make sure to read them aloud.
Also, if we can, we could put, Sheila, in the chat, if we could put my email in the chat. If anybody would love to contact any of us, we can put our email in the chat. Jack, can you do that?
Perfect. That'd be great.
So
And
if
we
anybody has any follow-up questions or need of help, feel free to contact our office.
Awesome. Thank you. And we do have some questions coming in right now. It looks like one of the questions is, how much do these services cost, and is there financial assistance available?
When you say services, you mean legal services. So it depends. It could get costly if you're going to hire an attorney. I think that you can get waivers of filing fees. You file a financial statement with the court, and then the court can approve a waiver of the filing fees. I'm not sure of different organizations. I don't know, does Elevate do any of, I don't think Elevate does any of this.
No.
I'm not sure of any of the organizations that will do the adoptions for protection.
The adoption fee itself for the step parent adoption in Santa Clara County, I believe, is $20. If you do through family court and do a parentage action, that is generally $450 for each party or above. For that, you can get a fee waiver depending on your financial circumstances, and that's all available at the self-help center. But as far as the services, legal services, you kind of have a couple options. You can either hire an attorney to do all of this paperwork for you, which can be on the costly side if you want to have them do that. Another potential option is having a law firm consult with you, so they don't represent you and they don't file the documents on your behalf, but they're kind of a tool there where they can double check the filings and make sure that you have all the information done correctly. That's still going to be on the costly side, but it's going to be less costly because they're not driving the bus. They're really just there as a tool to answer whatever questions you have as you're doing the paperwork yourself.
Another option is if you can get a what we call a legal document preparer that are licensed with the state of California to help you prepare the paperwork. But then again, as Erica said, I would encourage you to make sure that you at least have an attorney review that paperwork before it's submitted. And I've worked with some LDPs, the legal document preparers, that work on their own. They can't represent you. They can't advise you of the law that's a misdemeanor. So I work with them, and I act as the attorney that's actually supervising the legal document preparer. And you can set up something like that and find a legal document preparer who's a lot less expensive to help you prepare those documents, but make sure that you have an attorney just review it at the very least.
Thank you. And then we have two other questions here. The next one is, does documentation status matter?
Not for adoptions at all. So that's why I'm saying it could help protect your family in case of something happening in the future. So that you can make sure that the children are protected, especially if the other spouse or partner, or you add a third parent who is documented. It helps secure the children's future. So it's just something else that I would recommend thinking about.
You don't need to furnish any sort of identification, and you don't need to provide any information about your documentation status in the process of an adoption. So if you choose to go through that, you're still protected. It's not going to expose you to anything.
And then the last question I'm seeing here, what is the cost associated with self-filing the adoption paperwork?
So the filing fee for a step parent adoption is, I believe, $20 in this county. That is subject to change. As far as the adult adoption, that's a free cost. There is no filing fee associated with that. If you're doing a regular step parent adoption where the child was not born of the marriage or domestic partnership, there's going to be a social services fee, and that can range, but sometimes you can get a waiver or a reduction of that fee, but you're going to have to apply for that directly with social services.
And then not a question here, but just a comment. Someone was just saying Erica's dog is so cute. So
Thank you.
just wanted to share that.
She's having a great time. I think one more question just came in. I just got a notification. Yeah.
Yeah, so I see here, if the non-gestational parent who is seeking the second parent adoption is a trans man who was assigned female at birth, but has done a legal gender marker change and has an M gender marker, would they still be eligible as same-sex marriage?
Are they already married prior to the transition? Either way, you're still going to be able to do a step parent adoption. What you might want to do if you got married before the gender marker change, you can get remarried as a heterosexual couple. And I would recommend doing that because I don't know what's going to happen in the future if they completely reverse same-sex marriages and you were married prior as a same-sex couple. it kind of protects your family, and then you can still do your step-parent adoption.
And for the purposes of the adoption, it doesn't really necessarily matter what your gender markers are as a parent. The only thing that it might matter on is the VS-44, which is the court record of adoption. And on that form, actually, there are three check boxes. There is mother, father, and then parent. And so in that case, if you wanted to, you could change it to father, or you could change it to mother, or you can just do general parent. And I think that's pretty great that they have updated that form. These are all great questions.
And I'm expecting a lot of concerns with the trans community coming up and with families with trans parents. So, and we have several cases in our office with trans parents. So I don't know exactly what will happen or when, but I'm just I'm hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. And that's why I'm saying just be very, very careful. So if you have a same-sex marriage and then you transition and got your gender marker change and everything, you might want to consider just doing a quick civil marriage and re-register and get a marriage certificate as a heterosexual couple. Just to protect yourself.
And there's a follow-up question to that. It says, so you can get married twice to the same person?
Sure,
Okay.
sure. Because now you have a different name and a different gender marker.
You may also be able to, through the vital statistics, the VS forms, you might be able to update your marriage certificate as well.
I would be careful of that because it'll flag them. That's the
I
only
see.
thing. So my recommendation is just being a little bit cautious with the future. I would get a whole new marriage certificate, so in case something happens, there's nothing flagged to tie it back because you've got a new name, you got a new gender marker.
Right, because
And
it would show in the
usually you
records that
get
it
a
was
new
amended.
and you usually get a new birth certificate. So you're gonna have all of that new. I would just, to be on the safe side, I would just get a whole new marriage certificate.
Sorry, I must have clicked a button. Another question just came in. Would it be a problem that there is no marriage dissolution with the new marriage or with the new
Oh,
marriage
you mean to get a
certificate?
new marriage certificate?
I think so.
No, just go ahead and get a new marriage certificate because either way, you're still married. But if for some reason in the future we lose the same-sex marriage and that certificate is no longer valid, you now have a new certificate to take its place.
It acts more like a safety net in that circumstance.
And especially because you got married under the other name and other gender marker. And so now this current marriage certificate is going to be a different name and a different gender marker. No other questions?
It looks like so far no other questions are coming in. But of course, if anyone else has any last questions, please feel free to go to your toolbar and click the Q&A so that we can answer any other questions. Let's see. I see someone said, this was so helpful. Thank you, BJ, Erica, and Jack, and Erica's dog.
Leo, they said thank you.
She's
She opened
asleep.
her eyes.
She's one of our mascots.
Yes, the
So cute.
office dog.
I'm also sending out in the chat for folks again. If you haven't done so already, please fill out our short pre-training survey, demographic survey. It's anonymous, it's fairly quick. And you should be able to see the option for today's Q Corner chat. We also shared contact information from all the presenters today. So please, I encourage folks to, save their information in case any questions come up in the future. All right.
Hearing a bunch of music outside.
It's Thursday. They've got a live band.
Party down at San Pedro Square.
Oh, that's right. All right. So I think we'll just wait like one other minute till 6:30 in case anyone else has any last questions, and then we'll go ahead and close up. And someone in the Q&A mentioned, thank you. This was very informative and helpful. Appreciate y'all.
I think that's live music outside.
You know?
There's a live band on Thursday and Friday nights.
Yeah, we're hearing them
Mhm.
very loud.
All right, then it's 6:30. So again, thanks everyone for attending. Thank you to our lovely presenters for all of this really important information and answering all of these questions. Folks had some really good questions, so I'm glad we were able to address them. And so again, if you haven't done the demographic survey, please do so. And we will make sure to send out to folks the recording in the upcoming weeks. So please make sure to look out for that.
Thank you all.
Right. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
evening. Bye.
Bye.